Jerry Seinfeld just turned down $25 million for a single car in his collection. And folks, that wasn't even his most valuable ride.
This is a sweet car right
Okay,
here.
now check this out.
This is beautiful.
I thought the coolest car, American-made, for the coolest guy.
While most people know him as the comedian who made a show about nothing, real car guys know him as the man with possibly the greatest Porsche collection on the planet. From a $142 million Mercedes to a Porsche worth more than most people's retirement accounts, we're diving into Jerry's incredible garage. And wait until you see number 4. It's a one-of-one prototype that even Porsche themselves tried to buy back. This isn't just a car collection, this is automotive history with a New York sense of humor. Number 15. 1955 Porsche 550 Spyder. Let's kick things off with something special, Jerry's 550 Spyder. Now, most folks know this as James Dean's little bastard, but Jerry's example, chassis number 550-0060, tells a completely different story. This particular car has never been crashed, never been restored, and still has the original toolkit that Porsche packed in back in '55, right down to the German-made screwdrivers with their original wooden handles. The engineering on this thing is pure precision. That 1.5-liter flat 4 might only make 110 horsepower, but it's how it makes that power interesting. 4 overhead camshafts, dual Solex carburetors, and a roller-bearing crankshaft that could rev to 7,500 RPM when most American V8s were calling it quits at $5,000. The whole engine weighs just 150 pounds. Folks, that's lighter than some modern motorcycle engines. Jerry found this car in a barn in Vermont, where it had been sitting since 1972. The original owner was a dentist who bought it new but thought it was too small for highway driving. Can you believe that? The car had just 1,200 original miles when Jerry bought it. During the preservation process, not restoration, this car's too original to restore, they found the original break-in oil still in the engine. That's like finding dinosaur DNA. And the best part? Jerry actually drives it. He took it to a Cars and Coffee meet in Connecticut, and some kid asked him if it was a kit car. Jerry just smiled and said, "Yeah, something like that." The next day, the same kid probably saw one sell at auction for $5.5 million. Number 14. 1959 Porsche 718 RSK. Here's a piece of racing history that'll make any Porsche fan weak in the knees. This isn't just any 718 RSK, this is chassis number 718-018, the actual car that won its class at Le Mans in 1959. The story of how Jerry got this car is almost as incredible as the car itself. He was doing a comedy tour in Europe back in 2008 when he heard rumors about a mysterious RSK hidden away in a German collector's private museum. Now, let's talk about what makes this car special. That 1.5-liter quad-cam engine is a masterpiece of German engineering. 4 overhead camshafts when most cars still had flatheads, twin spark plugs per cylinder, and roller bearings throughout. It makes 142 horsepower at 7,500 RPM, and remember folks, this whole car weighs just 1,260 pounds. That's lighter than a modern Harley-Davidson. The body is hand-formed aluminum, and every panel is numbered to match the chassis. During the preservation process, they found the original Le Mans scrutineering stamps still visible on the frame. The previous owner had never cleaned them off. Now that's preservation. The car even came with its original pit signals board from Le Mans, complete with hand-painted numbers. Jerry's added his own chapter to this car's racing history. He's campaigned it at the Monterey Historics 3 times. And get this, he still uses the same pit signals board they used at Le Mans in '59. The car's still running on its original type of Dunlop racing tires, which have to be special ordered from a company in the UK that makes them by hand using the original molds. Number 13. 1964 Porsche 911. Now, here's something really special. One of the earliest 911s ever built, number 307 off the production line. Back then, they were still calling it the 901 until Peugeot threw a fit about the name. This car is so early, it still has some 901 parts that Porsche changed for regular production. Jerry found this piece of history in Sweden, where it had been with the same family since new. Talk about provenance. The engine is the original 2.0-liter flat six, making 130 horsepower. But here's what makes this one special. It's got the rare Type 901/01 engine, hand-built by the racing department before Porsche standardized production. The Weber carburetors are different from later models, and the cam timing is more aggressive. Jerry says it revs unlike any other early 911 he's driven, and this guy's driven plenty. The color is signal red, but not just any signal red. This is the original formula that Porsche later changed because it was too expensive to produce. During restoration, they actually found a sample of the original paint inside the gas tank, where Porsche always sprayed a test patch, and had it analyzed by the same company that made it in 1964. Now, the cost to reproduce 1 gallon? $4,000. Talk about attention to detail. Inside, it's got the ultra-rare wood-rimmed steering wheel that only came on the first 500 cars. The 5-speed transmission is so precise, Jerry says it makes modern gearboxes feel like stirring soup with a baseball bat. Even the radio is special. It's the original Blaupunkt Frankfurt unit that could pick up police broadcast. Probably came in handy on the Autobahn. The restoration story is incredible. It took 3 years and cost more than a new Ferrari, but every single part is either original or reproduced to exact 1964 specifications. They even tracked down the original assembly line worker who installed the wiring harness. He was 93 years old and living in Stuttgart, but he remembered this exact car because of its early production number. Number 12, 1973 Porsche Carrera RS 2.7. Here's what Jerry calls his perfect automotive achievement. This isn't just any RS, it's one of only 500 lightweight models built, number 230 to be exact. It still wears its original Grand Prix white paint with those iconic green Carrera stripes. The car was originally ordered by Swedish rally driver Erik Karlsson, but he never took delivery because he got a factory drive with Saab instead. Talk about a lucky break for Jerry. The 2.7-liter flat six is mechanical perfection. 210 horsepower might not sound like much today, but in a car weighing just 2,150 pounds, it's plenty. The engine uses Nikasil-coated cylinders, technology borrowed from Porsche's Can-Am racing program. The mechanical fuel injection is so precisely calibrated that you can hear individual injectors clicking at idle. During the preservation, not restoration, this car's too original, they found the original assembly line chalk marks still visible on the engine case. What makes this car really special is its completeness. It's got the original toolkit, owner's manual, and even the factory window sticker. The trunk still has the original Space Saver tire that's never been used. Jerry even has the original bill of lading from when it was shipped from Stuttgart to Malmö, Sweden. Talk about documentation. The driving experience is pure magic. No power steering, no air conditioning, not even a radio. Just that incredible mechanical symphony behind your head. The thin-gauge steel body panels are so light, you can actually feel them flexing in crosswinds. The steering wheel's so precise, Jerry says it makes modern cars feel like driving a couch. Number 11, 1949 Porsche 356/2 Gamon Coupe. This is where the Porsche story really begins, folks. One of only 50 cars built in Gmünd, Austria, before Porsche moved back to Stuttgart. The body's hand-hammered aluminum because steel was too expensive in post-war Austria. Each panel was shaped over wooden bucks by craftsmen who used to build aircraft parts. You can actually see the hammer marks under certain lighting. That's not damage, it's history. The 1.1-liter flat 4 makes about 40 horsepower, borrowed from the Volkswagen Beetle, but heavily modified. The cylinders were bored out, compression raised, and they added twin Solex carburetors. Every single part was hand-fitted. No two Gmünd cars are exactly alike. Jerry's car, chassis number 50, was actually the last one built in Austria before production moved to Germany. The restoration story is pure Hollywood. Jerry found the engine in Switzerland, being used as a coffee table display in a Porsche dealer showroom. The body was in Austria, stored in a barn since 1962. The transmission? It turned up at a swap meet in New Jersey of all places. The previous owner had no idea what he had. Bought it for $400 thinking it was a VW transmission. Jerry spent 5 years and over $750,000 putting it all back together. Inside, it's like stepping into 1949. The wool carpet was rewoven by the same company that supplied Porsche back then. The leather comes from the original supplier in Germany, who still had some hides from the period in storage. Even the paint is historically correct. They analyzed the original color under the dashboard and had it perfectly matched. Number 10. 1955 Mercedes-Benz 300 SL Gullwing. Let's take a break from the Porsches and talk about this masterpiece. Jerry's Gullwing is one of only 29 built with all aluminum bodywork, the holy grail of 300 SLS. When he bought it in 2009, it still had the original factory toolkit wrapped in its original oilcloth. Even the jack had never been used. That fuel-injected 3.0-liter straight six was decades ahead of its time. 240 horsepower through mechanical fuel injection when most cars still had carburetors. The engines tilted 50 degrees to the side to fit under that low hood line. The fuel injection pump was actually developed from a Luftwaffe aircraft engine. Talk about aerospace technology. The aluminum body saves 176 pounds compared to the steel version, but working on it requires special skills. Jerry had to fly in a specialist from Germany who learned his craft at Mercedes in the 1950s. The restoration took 3 years and cost nearly $1 million. They even recreated the original paint by analyzing a sample found inside the door jamb. Here's something cool. The car came with its original factory build sheet showing it was ordered by a Swiss industrialist who specified rare Rudge knockoff wheels and special leather from his own cattle farm. Jerry kept everything original, right down to the plaid seat inserts that most owners replaced. Number 9. 1969 Porsche 917K. Here's the Big Daddy, chassis number 917-024, with Le Mans history that'll make any racing fan weak in the knees. This isn't just any 917. It's the car that finished second at Le Mans in 1970 wearing that iconic Gulf oil livery. Jerry bought it directly from the Porsche Factory Museum, and the story goes that even the CEO of Porsche tried to talk him out of driving it. That air-cooled flat 12 is a masterpiece of engineering. 630 horsepower from 4.9 liters with a red line of 8,400 RPM. The engine block is magnesium. You can't even weld it if it cracks. Each cylinder has its own fuel injection pump, and the titanium connecting rods are so light you can lift them with 2 fingers. The whole engine weighs just 528 pounds, less than a modern Subaru 4-cylinder. Here's something wild. The car's original driver, Brian Redman, helped Jerry learn how to drive it. Spent 2 weeks at Willow Springs teaching him the quirks of 917 ownership. The biggest challenge? The car has to be preheated before starting. You literally pump warm oil through the engine for 45 minutes before you can fire it up. Skip that step, and you're looking at a $200,000 rebuild. The restoration was done by the same guys who maintained it at Le Mans in 1970. They found the original pit-to-car radio still working, complete with recorded messages from the race. The Gulf livery isn't paint. It's actually a specially formulated powder coat that matches the original sponsor's colors exactly. Even the seatbelts are original, though Jerry had to sign a waiver acknowledging that they're technically expired. Number 8. 1973 Porsche 911 Carrera RS Lightweight. Here's the crown jewel, one of only 200 lightweight models built, and possibly the most original example left. Jerry spent 7 years tracking this one down, and when he finally found it, it was being used as a coffee table display in a German Porsche dealer showroom. The dealer had no idea it was a real RS lightweight until Jerry pointed out the special chassis number. The 2.7-liter engine makes 210 horsepower, but in lightweight spec, the car weighs just 1,984 pounds. They achieved this by using thinner steel for the body panels, thinner glass, fiberglass bumpers, and removing all sound deadening. Even the carpet is specially woven to be lighter. The rear windows are plexiglass, and they're so thin you can actually flex them with your hand. During restoration, they discovered this was one of the first RS models built, evidenced by the handwritten production notes still stapled to the original build sheet. The engine was actually assembled by Hans Mesger himself. The legendary Porsche engineer's signature is still visible on the case. Jerry says knowing that makes him nervous every time he revs it past 7,000 RPM. Number 7. 1959 Porsche 356A Carrera GS GT. Talk about rare. This is one of only 20 Carrera GS GT models ever built, and one of just 7 known to exist today. This car was Porsche's answer to Ferrari in the late 50s, and boy did they bring their A-game. The 4-cam engine was essentially a detuned version of their racing engine, making 130 horsepower from just 1.6 liters. The engine is a work of art. 4 overhead camshafts when most cars still had flatheads, twin spark plugs per cylinder, and a roller-bearing crankshaft that could rev to 7,600 RPM. Each cylinder has its own carburetor, and synchronizing them is more like tuning a piano than working on a car. Jerry has to warm up the engine for 20 minutes before driving it, and the oil has to be changed every 1,000 miles. The restoration took 4 years and cost more than a new Ferrari. They had to recreate parts that hadn't been manufactured since Eisenhower was president. The aluminum body panels were so thin that they had to bring in an aircraft restoration specialist to repair them. Even the paint is special. It's the original silver metallic, but with actual silver powder mixed into the base coat. Number 6. 1964 Porsche 904 Carrera GTS. Here's a car that changed racing history. One of only 106 built, this particular 904 won its class at the Targa Florio in '64. The body was designed by Butzi Porsche himself, and it was Porsche's first foray in fiberglass construction. Every panel was hand-laid using techniques borrowed from boat building. The engine's a real jewel, a 2.0-liter 4-cam flat 4 making 180 horsepower. But here's the crazy part. This car has its original engine, which almost never happens with 904s. Most were blown up racing and replaced with simpler pushrod engines. Jerry found this one in Japan, where it had been preserved in a climate-controlled bubble since 1970. The restoration was done by the same guys who originally built these cars in Stuttgart. They even found one of the original fiberglass mold makers, now in his 90s, who consulted on repairing some stress cracks. The paint is so thin you can see the fiberglass weave through it, just like in 1964. Number 5. 1958 Porsche 550A Spyder. This isn't just any 550A, it's the exact car that won the Nürburgring in 1958. Jerry found it in pieces, scattered across 3 collections in Europe. The engine was being used as a coffee table in Monaco, if you can believe that. Took him 5 years just to get all the parts in one place. That 1.5-liter 4-cam engine is basically a Swiss watch that makes noise. 135 horsepower doesn't sound like much until you realize the whole car weighs just 1,212 pounds. The engine has to be warmed up for 30 minutes before you can rev it past 4,000 RPM, and it needs an oil change every 750 miles. During restoration, they found the original timing charts from the Nürburgring race still in the tool roll. Even discovered some period-correct German chocolate bars stashed under the seat, probably the driver's emergency rations. Jerry kept them, wrapper and all. Number 4. 1974 Porsche 911 Carrera RSR. Now this is special. One of only 15 RSRs built for privateer racing teams. This particular car competed at Le Mans, Daytona, and Sebring. The previous owner? Paul Newman, who raced it in IMSA during the late 70s. Under that fiberglass tail sits a 3.0-liter flat 6 making 330 horsepower. The engine's got titanium connecting rods, magnesium crankcases, and twin-plug ignition. Each cylinder has its own fuel injection pump, and the whole setup needs to be synchronized every 500 miles. The car still has Newman's modifications, including a special boost control he designed himself. During restoration, they found his handwritten notes about tire pressures and gear ratios stuffed in the glove box. Jerry kept everything exactly as Newman left it. Number 3. 1955 Porsche 550/1500 RS Spyder. This is the car Jerry turned down $25 million for, and once you hear its story, you'll understand why. It's one of only 5 factory team cars, and the only one that still has its original body, engine, and transmission. This exact car finished 3rd at Le Mans in '55, driven by Wolfgang von Trips. The 1.5-liter 4-cam engine is basically mechanical jewelry. Every single part is numbered and matched to this specific chassis. The crankshaft is electron beam welded, the connecting rods are titanium, and the whole thing revs to 7,800 RPM in 1955. Each cylinder head has 85 individual parts, and they all have to be adjusted by hand. Jerry spent 12 years chasing this car before the previous owner, a Swiss collector, finally agreed to sell. During restoration, they found Von Tripp's cigarettes still in the glove box, along with his handwritten pace notes from Le Mans. The car even came with its original pit signaling boards and timing sheets. Number 2. 1970 Porsche 908/3 Spyder. Here's a piece of racing history that'll make your head spin. One of only 13 built, this 908/3 was specifically designed for just 2 races, the Targa Florio and Nürburgring. The whole car weighs just 1,200 pounds, which is lighter than most motorcycles. The 3.0-liter flat 8 is pure racing technology. Titanium everything, magnesium engine cases, and a sound that'll make your hair stand on end. It makes 350 horsepower and revs to 9,200 RPM. The fuel injection system has 16 individual butterflies that have to be synchronized by ear. Jerry says it takes longer to start this car than to drive it. The car came with its original spare engine, still in the Porsche Racing Division crate from 1970. He even has the original customs tags from when it was shipped to Sicily for the Targa Florio. During restoration, they found Joe Seifert's personal setup notes written in grease pencil inside the front trunk. And at number 1, the 1973 Porsche 917/30 Can-Am. This is it, folks, the most powerful Porsche ever built. One of only 6 917/30s ever made, this is the actual car that Mark Donohue used to set the closed course speed record at Talladega. 1,580 horsepower in qualifying trim, from a twin-turbocharged flat 12 that sounds like God's own alarm clock. The engineering is otherworldly. The engine block is magnesium. The turbochargers are bigger than most engine blocks, and at full boost, it drinks fuel faster than it can pump it. Jerry needs 3 mechanics just to start it, and they have to warm up the engine for an hour before it can run. The titanium exhaust gets so hot, it glows blue. The car came with all its original timing sheets from the record run, plus Donohue's personal notebooks. They even found a spare driving suit in the original transport crate. During restoration, they discovered the secret boost control system that Penske developed. It was hidden inside what looked like a brake fluid reservoir. Folks, what we've seen isn't just a car collection. It's probably the finest assembly of Porsche history outside of Stuttgart. From a humble 356 to the most powerful Porsche ever built, Jerry's Garage tells the story of automotive evolution through German engineering. But here's what makes this collection special. These aren't museum pieces just gathering dust. Every single one of these cars gets driven, maintained, and enjoyed exactly as their engineers intended. You know, Jerry once said something interesting about his collection. He said, "People ask me all the time what these cars are worth, but that's like asking what the Mona Lisa is worth. The real value isn't in the money, it's in the history, the engineering, and the stories these cars tell." Coming from a guy who made his fortune making people laugh, that's pretty profound. The total value of this collection? Well, north of $150 million at last count. But as Jerry says, when you love something, you don't count the cost. And looking at how he preserves and shares these incredible machines, you can tell this isn't about investment. It's about passion. Remember what Jerry says about collecting cars. The best car in the world is the one that makes you smile every time you turn the key. And judging by this collection, Jerry's been smiling a lot. This is Vintage Vehicles, reminding you that sometimes the best stories in automotive history aren't just about the cars. They're about the people who love them enough to preserve them for future generations. We'll see you next time, folks, and don't forget to subscribe and check out this video.